Hello and welcome. I'm Chris Gilmore and today I'm joined by my colleague Erin Coyle. Welcome, Erin.
Hello, thank you for joining us.
Erin and I are both advisors at Strategy First Financial Planning, and the reason we are talking with Erin today is because Erin is our aged care advice specialist. Now, before we get into the presentation today, a reminder that the information today is general advice only and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation or needs. So before making any decisions, we recommend seeking advice from the relevant professionals. Now, aged care is truly unique. It's complex. It involves the family. It's not just about the individual. It's about choice. It's about looking after someone we love. It's rarely about getting the perfect financial outcome, but more about understanding the aged care framework, understanding the options so that decisions can be made. Today we're going to scratch the surface, but please know that we're here to help navigate through this tricky and emotional minefield. But to get us started today, Erin, perhaps you could take us through the different types of care that are available to people.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We all know that Australians are living longer than they ever have before, and it's completely understandable why many elderly Australians would like to stay in their own home for as long as possible. It's a familiar environment, it's what they're comfortable with. However, to do so, sometimes a little bit of help or a lot might be required to do it safely. It could be something as simple as, transport to the shops or medical appointments or some help with the cleaning. High levels of care might mean assistance with things like, more formal nursing care or administering medications, maybe bathing and self-care. But in these situations, sometimes or often a home care package, which is federally funded and administered by approved providers with a co-payment that's made by the care recipient, can cover some or all of the sort of things that they need to stay comfortably in their own home. However, sometimes staying in their own home is no longer a safe option for them or for their carers. So it could be a gradual decline or it could happen suddenly. Either way, it's a really stressful and emotional time for friends, family and carers of that loved one. They're then facing big decisions. Today, I'm hoping to help navigate the path to residential care for yourself or for a loved one, and to make that planning and that transition just that little bit easier.
Yeah, it's truly an area that requires a certain level of empathy and care, which I know Erin has. Many years ago, I got to work with an aged care provider, more in the area of diversional therapy. And I loved that the place was, filled with all these people who really wanted to connect, lots of personalities, and I guess we see aged care in this sort of negative light, but from my experience, it was warmth and it was also very cheeky, which I loved. Now, as the spouse or the child of someone having to navigate this space, the child of someone who's going into care is navigating this space. What are some of the things that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, sure. So first and foremost, consider the practicalities of a residential facility and its location. So is it really important that you, a partner, friends and family can easily visit? If so, that might actually narrow some of the location options. Is there a priority to maintain existing networks or, particular GPs or other professionals that person might need? Are there social activities or religious affiliations that are really important to be maintained? So these practicalities are really important considerations and things to think about, because it can make the world of difference between a really stressful transition for someone, for a new resident going into care, or a relatively seamless one. Secondly, I always suggest organising a tour of potential facilities and creating a short list together as a family if possible. Just like you did, Chris, meet the nursing staff and the support staff. If you can, talk to some of the existing residents, get a really good feel for the place, and see whether or not your loved one will actually be able to settle in well, have their care needs taken care of, and be well catered for. So keep in mind that this does go beyond things like the plush interiors and fancy furnishings and beautiful brochures. And while these are really nice things to have, try not to let them distract you too much from the core reason for being there, which is the quality care of your loved one. In my time helping families with a transition to aged care, utilising a period of respite care before becoming a permanent resident is a really nice way to sort of test the waters and give families the confidence and comfortable feeling that their loved one will actually be taken care of on a more permanent basis. And it's not really surprising that when I talk to families having gone through the transition to aged care and I ask them what influenced their decision, 99% of the time, it's the quality of care that was the ultimate deciding factor, and that surpassed almost all of the other priorities when they were choosing the right place.
Okay, so what about financially? So you mentioned the quality of care being the priority or the highest or the top of the list, basically. But we know financially that space is really complex. It's really not well understood at all. It can cause stress, a lot of uncertainty. And whether the family like it or not, they're going to be forced to make some sort of financial decision or multiple decisions, which seem to have some sort of flow-on impact onto something else. Can you take us through that minefield?
Yeah, and a minefield it absolutely is. So in aged care, you'll find both numbers and acronyms bandied about left, right, and centre. To put it simply, there are 3 broad areas that you need to consider financially, and each of those areas has 2 subsections. So I should note before I start here, though, that the fees are different for residents in what we call low means, who are low means residents, and most often these are full age pensioners and sometimes part age pensioners. But being a government supported resident may restrict some of the options in terms of facilities, particularly if an urgent place is needed. So if you're concerned about this, or you think that someone who needs to go into care will fall into this this category, it's really worthwhile getting some advice, and ideally beforehand, to understand their fees and their options. But for most people, though, these 3 areas will apply. So first and foremost, we've got the room that they occupy. It's their accommodation cost. So we've got 2 broad options here: buy the room or rent the room are the 2 options as I like to see them. There is a third, which is a combination of both, but we won't get into those details today. We're trying to keep it as simple as possible. Each bed has an advertised price, and the amounts can vary within the same facility, so between different rooms and also within different across different providers. So this advertised price to buy the room, as the name suggests, it gives them the opportunity to live and occupy that room. When they leave, that amount that's been paid gets refunded to the resident or to their estate if they pass away. So it's important to note that the amount that's paid towards a RAD doesn't earn a return, but there is more to think about than just that. Sometimes it's just not practical or feasible for a resident to part with that level of capital just to fund their room when there's other fees and expenses still continuing on. So that brings me to the second option, which is the daily accommodation payments, or DAPs. It's like renting the room, and it's payable when some or all of the RAD hasn't been paid. And like being a renter in the private market, any amount that's paid towards occupying that room isn't refunded when the resident leaves or passes away, but it does free up a lot of capital or gives a lot more flexibility than just needing to come up with a significant level of capital for the room. So what this flexibility means is that oftentimes in various sources or media or just generally in the public perception, the often touted, we were forced to quickly sell the family home to fund aged care fees is not necessarily true. And in many cases, selling the family home particularly quickly may result in unforeseen consequences that really haven't been considered. And the 2 that we see most frequently are the loss of some sort of government entitlement, like a Centrelink age pension or a healthcare card, or they all of a sudden find that their other aged care fees are very different to what they're expecting them to be. And that can really add undue stress in an already really challenging situation. So it's really important to understand the impacts of that before you make a big decision like selling the family home.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I think, people will often say they've been forced to sell the family home, but they've done so without necessarily doing proper due diligence, exploring the options and also the implications of the decisions they're about to make. So that's really, really important point there. But Erin, you've touched on accommodation fees. What about the other 2?
Yeah, so next up we've got care and living fees. There are 2 of these. The first is the basic daily fee, and this is paid by all residents regardless of their financial situation. It covers the basic living expenses, so things like meals, laundry, staffing costs, utilities. It's currently about $60 a day, but it does go up twice each year. The second care component is the means-tested care fee. Now, this fee is calculated based on a resident's financial situation. And like everything in this world, different assets and different income types are treated differently when plugging it into this calculation, and different family situations are accounted for differently as well. So the fees that are payable can vary widely, and they can also be significant, well into the hundreds of dollars a day, particularly if you have high care needs and a strong financial position. That being said, it's often reassuring for a lot of families to know that there are annual and lifetime caps on this means-tested care fee. So many families who are expecting to pay a means-tested care fee will benefit from getting some analysis to determine what their funding options for those aged care fees will look like, and what the impact of restructuring assets will do to those means-tested care fees, and also what you need to report. So the key here is to look at what those options look like and what you need to do in advance. And honestly, this is probably the most misunderstood part of aged care. So many families find it really valuable to actually just sit down and independently look at cash flow and asset longevity planning so they can go in knowing exactly what they're up for. And the third component, these personal expenses. Again, there's two components here. Some facilities will charge an additional services fee or an extra services fee. These cover services and lifestyle expenses that aren't covered under any of the other fees. They're not for any sort of additional care. So you can't pay for any better nursing care, for example, but it covers additional facilities or activities. So things like a greater selection of meals and beverages at meal times, hairdressing, access to pay TV or streaming services, a daily newspaper dropped into their room. And each facility will be able to tell you what additional fees might apply under this bracket and whether or not they're compulsory. And then finally, while not explicitly a fee, one really important thing to budget for and to look at, and is often overlooked, are the residents' personal expenses that will continue once they've moved into care. So private health insurance premiums are a really big one, charitable donations or gifts that they want to continue to give, personal items like clothing or their favourite brand of shampoo or shaving cream. It's really important to continue to budget for those items because they will need to continue to be paid by the resident. They're not covered by any of the other sorts of care fees.
Okay, so it's easy to see how overwhelming aged care can actually be. Whilst Erin catches her breath, I might just run through my takeouts from what Erin just went through there. So the first would be practicalities. So, community, GP support around that person. The second would be quality of care. So if you can try out a couple of places, whether it be just attending the accommodation or periods of respite, can be really helpful. And the third is financially, what are the financial decisions and also the implications of those things. So those are probably my three takeouts from what we just went through. But there's a lot to consider there, especially when, I guess, if you're that person or one of those people helping, maybe mum and dad out with these decisions, there's a lot on your plate. It could be just the broader family, kids at school, having to still turn up at work. It could be geographical location. It could also be having a number of siblings or other people involved in that decision making who have different levels of understanding, different levels of engagement, and potentially even, different ideas on what they think may be best for mum and dad. Is that a pretty, common family scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. So we know that it's a really overwhelming time to be making all of these decisions. You're often faced with a frail or a person who's really unwell or deteriorating in a condition that they perhaps haven't been recently. So it's a really overwhelming time for friends and family, and a lot of those decisions often fall on the next generation or really close friends, or sometimes the partner themselves. So That was part of the catalyst for me actually going out and doing my aged care specialisation, was that I saw my family go through this with my own grandparents several years ago, and I saw from someone who's got a financial background and who understands, who understood vaguely what was going on, how difficult it was to actually make decisions and get the whole family on board. So that's part of the reason why I went out and did my aged care specialisation. And we've now developed at Strategy First a range of fee-for-service options that actually are designed to help guide families either as they prepare to make this transition, maybe it's going to happen several months down the track, excuse me, but also for those who are actually going through that transition and filling out forms and getting their heads around it, so that you can be confident as an entire family or as a group that you're confident that you're making the right decisions for your loved one.
Yeah, it's very, very challenging indeed. But to know that you've gone through it yourself with your own family and then have specialised in it, I think it can give our clients and families some peace of mind knowing that you've actually got access to this fantastic resource. All you need to do is reach out and ask the question, and we can pick up that conversation. But I mentioned a moment ago some of the challenges that I guess the broader family have in helping mum and dad move into this next stage of life, and one of those being that you're making these decisions not just on your own oftentimes, but also with siblings and other people. One of the main benefits of getting advice is that it really does focus on the person going into care, their needs, their financial position. It cuts through the complexity. It brings everyone to some common ground essentially. And so if you're going to be spending your time and energies trying to be of help and assist, you may as well do it in a way that's productive and that's actually going to have everyone on the same page. So really encourage you to reach out to us, have that conversation, because we think the benefits are material for the whole family. But thank you, Erin, for taking us through the aged care landscape. There's certainly a lot more that we didn't get to touch on today, but there's a lot more detail there for you to understand as it impacts your own family and situation. As I said, please don't hesitate to reach out. But that's it from us today. Thank you, Erin, for your time.
Thanks, Chris.
And we look forward to speaking with you all soon. Take care.